Imagine the scenario. You're a developer and you need to go ahead and build some code. You need to install a number of dependencies, perhaps a code editor, and a number of frameworks, only to find that the code still doesn't compile on your machine, probably because you're missing some kind of frameworks or libraries. We've all been there, but perhaps we don't have to be there. Stick around in this episode as we talk about Visual Studio Code, the Remote Containers extension, and GitHub Codespaces and how all of these can help solve that challenge. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You are with me, Chris Reddington, and we will be talking about all things cloud. Now, thanks once again for joining this series of GitHub and how it relates to Azure. So, of course, we will be talking about GitHub Codespaces, as we mentioned a little bit earlier in the intro there, but we'll also be talking about Visual Studio Code and remote containers first, because they feed in to GitHub Codespaces. So you know the deal. Please go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you know as soon as there are new videos uploaded for you to go and view. Now, I just want to say a big thank you because I am seeing, since I've changed the format, a lot of growth in terms of the views and the subscribers steadily increase. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for your support. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump straight into things here. So what we're going to do is we're first going to go ahead and navigate over to the GitHub Codespaces site and just take a look through things here. So if you're not familiar with GitHub Codespaces, it's an offering that is available inside the cloud, inside your browser, where you can have a development environment easily accessible, which is a really great offering. It's currently in preview, so you need to request access to actually go and use it. It's not publicly available at the moment. But what I want to do in this video is just show you a little bit around the offering itself. And really the intent, as I hinted in the introduction there, is to simplify your workflow, make it really easy to get up and going. So if you think about your environment, you probably have a load of extensions that you go and work on. For example, you've customized your editor in some way. Really the idea behind GitHub Codespaces is to make that easier so you can develop from anywhere, not have to worry about all those dependencies in your local development environment, and make it easy to get going really quickly. So as I mentioned, you do have to go and request early access to that particular preview of Codespaces beta there. I'm already involved on that, as I mentioned, and that's what I'll be showing you a little bit today. So let's level set then and take a look at Visual Studio Code first off, and particularly the Remote Containers extension. So this Remote Containers extension, the idea behind it is you can go and use a Docker container as a full-featured development environment for your development needs. So the way that it works is you have a dev-container.json file, and that's a bit like a manifest if you want to think about things that way, in terms of what needs to happen and what is allowed inside of that container, let's say. You also have a Docker file as well. And really what happens then between VSCode on your local operating system is it connects out to the container which is hosting your code and which is running like a VSCode server effectively. And that's how the extension really works under the covers there. We're not really going to go into too much more detail, but at a high glance and at a high level, that's probably as much as you really need to understand. So if we jump back to our my.NET project that we've been looking at here, you'll see that, of course, we have our GitHub workflows, the source folder, the templates, the ARM templates, I mean, there as well, and the relevant bits and pieces that we've looked at previous episodes. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the necessary dependencies to go ahead and add a remote container and make it easy for us to set up an environment to develop this particular .NET project. So as we mentioned earlier, we need a dev-container.json file, and we also need a Docker file. Now, how do we go about making those particular files? What is it that we need to do to move forwards here? The first thing that we need to go and do here is we need to go ahead and create a .dev container folder, and that's the type of convention here, as we saw in the documentation a moment ago. And what we can do is we can go ahead and navigate to github.com/Microsoft/VSCode-dev-containers. And there is a wealth of different dev container examples already uploaded for you. So as we mentioned, we're using the my.NET project that we've been working on over the past few episodes. So we're going to, of course, use the .NET sample here. And in the GitHub page, it's got a wealth of information about how to actually go and use that particular example dev container, some of the parameters, for example, or arguments that you can go and tweak there, and how you can go and forward ports, etc. So you can see it has a .dev container folder in that repository there if you navigate into it. And there's a Docker file, there's a base.docker file, a .dev container JSON file, and some library scripts in there as well. So all of those aspects we need to include in our project. So we're going to really look through the three main ones here, the two Docker files that I mentioned a moment ago, and the dev container.json file. That's really what we're going to focus on in this particular video. So let's go first and navigate to the dev container.json file. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this into my own project here, this my.NET project first off. And you can see in here that there's a property in this dev container JSON file linking to that Docker file. So of course, we need to go ahead and pick up that Docker file from the environment there. So we're just going to navigate back to the GitHub repository and go and get that example Docker file as well. And you can see there are two. There's the base.docker file, there's the Docker file here as well. So we'll copy both of those into our repository just so we've got both of those there for completeness. And we will need those library scripts as well because they are actually referenced, as you'll see in a moment here, by the Docker file itself. So there we go. We'll go ahead and copy across that base.docker file there. And that is all we need. So let's just take stock for a moment. We've copied across those three files. We haven't copied across the library scripts yet. I'll probably do that off screen here in a moment just to make the recording a little bit quicker for us. But what you can see is this is just a Docker file, just like any other one that you've seen. There are some arguments that we have in there. We're taking it from some kind of base image, and we're installing some dependencies on top of that. And that's really how we're setting up our consistent development environment here. In the dev container JSON file, we can set up some additional arguments, but that is all we need to set up that container. So if we now go ahead and think about how we execute that container and actually go and run our code in there, what you'll notice on the bottom left of my screen here is I'm already using an extension here. I'm running in Windows Subsystem for Linux. If I hit Control-Shift-P in VS Code and type containers, you will notice that I have a remote containers extension installed. And there is an option for you to go ahead and open in a container. If you don't have that extension installed, it's really easy. Just search for the remote containers extension and you can go ahead and pull that from the VS Code marketplace. Now, I've already installed these images previously, so you can see it was very quick there to go ahead and spin the container up. The first time you do that, it may take a bit longer as it goes and pulls the images down, caches the layers, and runs those Docker containers that you need there. So at this point, I now have an environment where I have a Docker container running. And just to prove that, I'm going to bring up here my Windows Subsystem for Linux, type Docker PS. And as you can see on the screen, if you're viewing the video, if not, you'll have to trust me, that you can see there is a VSC-my.NET project. And that's really the container running in my local environment there. So that's pretty cool when you think about the mapping between the two there. Good. So now let's jump back to VS Code and let's actually open a new terminal tab. And what you can see here, I'm just doing an ls command, is these are the files of my particular project. If I navigate up a couple of directories, what you can see here is this is the effectively the operating system the container's running in there. And if we navigate back down the file tree there into workspaces and the my.NET project, we arrive back at the files for our particular system. And if I just type something in like .NET -- version, you will see that we have a particular version of .NET installed in our environment. But there's a problem, because the project itself that we're running is a .NET Core 3.1 app, and the runtime that we have installed in this container is .NET 5.0. So that is where we may need to just go ahead and tweak our Docker files a little bit and tweak the dev container.json to allow the environment to be in a consistent way how we want it to be there. So what we're going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and search in my extensions once again here in VS Code and search for Codespaces. And I'll do that without the space. It's Codespaces, one word. And what you'll see in there is there's a Visual Studio Codespaces and a GitHub Codespaces extension. Now, the GitHub Codespaces extension allows you to connect to GitHub Codespaces from your native VS Code IDE locally that you have been using, as you've seen on my own screen here. So what we've seen so far is I've been connecting to a container on my own machine. But what GitHub Codespaces allows you to do is connect to a container hosted in GitHub Codespaces, of course. Now, you don't need to go ahead and do that using the VS Code editor locally. So I mentioned, of course, about all those dependencies and getting them installed. Imagine a world where I could just go to a browser and have VS Code there ready for me to go. That is the exact idea behind GitHub Codespaces. As you can see on my screen if you're watching, I've navigated to a URL there on GitHub. So the way I access that is through my GitHub repository. But just to prove to you this is the exact same thing, if you take a look at this example here, you can see that I've navigated up a couple of directories here, and I have my own Cloud with Chris repository here rather than the .NET project this time. So let's go ahead and take a look at how I do this for my cloudwithchris.com work, because this is actually how I update the website and all of those bits and pieces. So you can see there once again that I'm back in the directory of my workspace. I have all of my files in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to run Hugo serve, which is the command to go ahead and run a Hugo website locally. What you'll notice there now on the right-hand side of my screen is a pop-up saying that some ports have been exposed. If I click on that tab for ports as well, you can see that port 1313 is now available to be port forwarded. So if I click on that link, what you'll see there now on screen is my website, or something that vaguely resembles my website there. So if we take a look inside the elements view and take a look at the HTML, let's see what's going on, because it's not quite rendering as I would expect it. There's something a bit strange going on. So you can see we're already in our development workflow. We're taking a look at what is happening in our own development environment. It worked on my machine. Why is it not working here? Well, there we go. We can see that actually in the website itself, it's referring to localhost 1313. Now, of course, when it tries to find the static assets for my website, there is no localhost 1313. There is this kind of long GitHub URL where it's actually showing my website. So we need to go and change where the site thinks those static assets are. So fortunately, in Blue Peter style, I've gone ahead and used an example I've got earlier here. So I'm going to go ahead and run that Hugo serve and pass in the correct base URL. And as you can see now, the website is loading as expected. Brilliant. So now let's think about a particular scenario. Let's go ahead and actually make some changes to our environment and make some changes to the website itself. So I'm just going to go ahead and navigate here into my particular content folder and take a look at some blogs. I'm going to clone my Hello World blog here, and I'm going to create a brand new blog called Hello World New. And let's go and change some information here. Maybe let's go ahead and update the description. Maybe let's go ahead and change the dates there, for example, the publish dates. Let's go ahead and update the description. as we go and do that there, and just make it a little bit different so we know that we've got some changes there to go and factor in. So we can see in the console there in the command line that there was a change. So let's go navigate to the blog and find the latest post. Hold on a minute. Something has gone a little bit strange. That is not the post we just created. So let's go take a look. There must be a bug here in what I've just created. So if we just take a look through all the front matter there of my particular content, upon first glance, doesn't look like anything's wrong. Maybe let's rebuild. Nope, still seems to be like there's an issue there. So let's carry on debugging a bit further. We can see that we added the wrong date there. So let's go ahead and update the date. Let's go ahead and update the publish date. And as we now go and take a look at the website, we should go and see that the latest blog post is there as we would expect. Brilliant. Now, I thought we changed the title. Let's go and take a look at the code again. We changed the description, not the title. Again, another bug that we've entered into the system. So let's go ahead and update that. And now you can see the title is as we would expect, Hello World 2. So if we navigate back to the browser and look at the source code aspect of VSCode there, we can now see that there are changes that we need to go and commit. So we can go ahead and stage those changes if we like. We can go ahead and create a new branch locally in that GitHub Codespace as well. And that will mean we could go ahead and then start triggering the rest of our workflow with GitHub Actions and everything else that we know and love when using VS Code. Just we haven't had to go ahead and set up that entire development environment in our machine. Instead, we've just gone ahead and updated that in the cloud in a container hosted by GitHub, not on our own machine there. So you can see now, if I scroll down through this list, I've got all of the extensions that I had locally in that particular environment as well. So it's gone ahead and set up my environment exactly as I would expect it. And you may not have spotted earlier, but once we actually navigated through the GitHub Codespace there and looked through the tree, you may have spotted as I scrolled through that there was actually a file or a folder, I should say, called the .files folder. There's a convention in GitHub. If you create a .files repository underneath your own account, then what I will do is GitHub Codespaces will go ahead and pull in this concept of .files. It's very common. I'll put a link in the description for you. But effectively, all of those common shortcuts perhaps and those aliases and all those little helper things that you have for your particular environments will be there available for you in GitHub Codespaces. So just think about that, what we've just looked at there. Having the power of VS Code, the extensions that you have access to, the containerized environment for your development environment there, and all of the extensions that you know and love, the aliases and the kind of little helper pieces that you have in maybe your own bash scripts or whatever they may be, all ready and available for you in an environment that you can spin up at a click of a button. That is the idea behind GitHub Codespaces. And you can probably tell, this is something that particularly excites me because I know the pain of having to set up those development environments. I've worked with numerous organizations where we've tried to go ahead and solve these types of problems. And this is a really elegant solution to go and address that. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, this is something I've already been using in my own production environment for cloudwithchris.com. So it's something that works really well for me. I can go ahead and navigate from that GitHub Codespace, change tab, and go and see that my builds are now, or my workflows are now working inside of GitHub Actions there based upon the changes I've made, and I've committed those changes into my version control. So there's a really nice offering that is shaping up here, and this is definitely one to keep a watch of and keep an eye on. So with that, I hope this episode has been very useful for you. If you are interested, go and take a look at the link in the description to the GitHub Codespaces beta. Certainly worth a look, I think at least, and go ahead and put yourself on the waiting list. I know that there is quite a long waiting list there, and the team are doing a lot of work to try and push people through. So it might take a bit of time there for you to get accepted, but as always, patience with these things is always appreciated. If you've enjoyed this content, you know what to do. Please hit that like button, please subscribe, and please do share with others. If you know someone who is encountering this challenge of setting up their development environment, then this could be a great video for them to showcase how VS Code and remote containers could help them in the interim, and maybe GitHub Codespaces once it becomes fully available for production usage. So with that, thank you for watching this particular episode. Hope you found it valuable, and until next time, bye for now.